Vladimir Putin is a master chess player. He learned at the KGB. I think we're playing poor game of checkers, and he's just beating the socks off of us, and he's laughing at us. He put his people into the Crimea. We're not doing anything to stop them. The president makes a few mumbled remarks, and as Washington Post said, it's in a fantasy land. They don't seem to understand what's going on. And Putin says, listen, I've got the right, if I want to put military force in the Ukraine because these people are being oppressed. And so John Kerry says, well, we'll give $1 billion. We'll loan $1 billion to the Ukrainians. Big deal.
Well, so far, warnings from the U.S. aren't making a big difference. Tensions are still high in Ukraine, with Russian troops firing warning shots at Ukrainian soldiers at an airbase. Ephraim Graham has the story.
Russia's on the wrong side of history on this.
Even in the face of comprehensive sanctions from the U.S. and other nations, Russia's military has tightened its grip on Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula, with an estimated 16,000 troops in the air, on the ground, and along the seas. That's 10,000 more than previous reports.
The country has plunged into chaos and anarchy.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin rules this area of eastern Ukraine now. And in a news conference today, he warned the West could also suffer damage from the sanctions, calling them counterproductive and harmful. He also accused the West of participating in an unconstitutional coup in Ukraine. Putin says his troops don't want to use force, and they're only there to protect ethnic Russians against violence. But many fear this stronghold is only the beginning. CBN's George Thomas is on the ground in the country.
I firmly believe that Russia's president, Vladimir Putin, has set his sights beyond just the Crimean Peninsula to the eastern regions of Ukraine. Clearly, thousands of Russian forces are in firm control of the Crimean Peninsula. But today, tens of thousands of pro-Russian demonstrators have taken to the streets of many key regions in the east.
The latest unrest unfolds as U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry makes his way to Ukraine in a show of support today, and with the promise of economic assistance. European foreign ministers meeting in Brussels are also sending a warning to Russia.
I hope very much that even at this stage, the government of Russia will see that it is in nobody's interests to continue to intervene in Ukraine's affairs.
For now, Putin has ordered troops participating in military exercises in western Russia near the Ukraine border to return to their permanent bases, while the U.S. and its allies are considering a wide range of economic sanctions against Russia. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
The problem with sanctions is we can't get our allies to do that. They need the Russian gas. A long time ago, Ronald Reagan warned about this. He said, we better be careful about that pipeline. And everybody said, well, that'll be jobs, it'll be prosperity and all that stuff. Well, actually, it's a pipeline, like a lifeline to Western Europe, and they cannot exist without the natural gas coming from Russia. So if Russia turns off the taps, where are they going to get the gas unless they get it from us? And we don't have enough LNG that is needed to transport our natural gas over to Europe. So it's a standoff. But the Russian army is a joke. They don't have any army worthy of the name. The United States could do something. There was a treaty signed with Turkey back in the 30s, which now enables a certain amount of tonnage to be brought through the Dardanelles into the Black Sea. We could slip some warships in there under that treaty, have a perfect right to do so, and we might show Mr. Putin that we're not a paper tiger and he can't push us around. The trouble with them is they've got nukes. They've got lots and lots of nukes. And many of those nukes are aimed at the United States of America, and they have the missile capability to get them here. And we don't want eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation like we had a long time ago with the Russians. But at the same time, we cannot allow him to take aggressive action and establish hegemony over a country that is supposed to be free and one of our allies. We need immediately to get Ukraine into the NATO alliance. We need some of those other East Bloc countries to come into NATO. We need to show Putin that he's going to be isolated and that there'll be trade sanctions. But we've got to get tough with him. He understands tough. He doesn't understand. He knows the kind of posture we've been putting on, which is just a bluff. He understands bluffing, and he's bluffing us. And he's winning. Well, here at home, something that is really a tragedy, we've been showing you right now about a Christian family in Germany who wanted to homeschool their children because they didn't want their children to be exposed to the secular, godless education that was being provided in the German schools. And the Germans say, if you don't put your children into our schools, we will take them away. So they fled the country, came to America and said, we want asylum. So the Obama administration has spent an extraordinary amount of money to beat them in court, to deny them this access. Now, remember, the Obama administration wants to let 12 million undocumented aliens become somehow citizens. Okay, 12 million. One family from Germany, Christian family, and they say, we haven't got room for you. Who are they kidding? Well, yesterday before the Supreme Court, the court said, we're sorry, we can't take your appeal. John Jessup has that story.
That's right, Pat. The German family has lost its final legal bid for asylum in the U.S. The Supreme Court rejected Uwe and Hannelore Romeike's appeal. In 2008, the family fled Germany because the state threatened to take their children away if they did not enroll in public school. The U.S. granted the family asylum, but it was later revoked, with the Obama administration opposing their bid to live in the U.S. The Romeikes now face deportation to Germany and thousands of dollars in fines. They also could lose custody of their 7 children. The Homeschool Legal Defense Association wants Congress to introduce a measure to help the Romeikes and others in similar situations. The latest major snowstorm is over, but the cold temperatures are back thanks to the phenomenon known as the polar vortex. Paul Strand has this look at the weather making a mess across the country.
Snow, rain, sleet. No, it's not the unofficial slogan for the United States Postal Service, but could be the slogan for the United States itself, as an array of weather has swept across the nation. Sunny California wasn't so sunny, as massive rainfall gave way to mudslides. Forecasters called the storm the largest since 2010. Even still, the 12 inches of rain wasn't enough to reverse California's drought. In Texas, drivers were caught off guard as sleet hit the area. Backups on sleet-covered highways left passengers stranded in their cars for hours. On Interstate 45, traffic stretched on for 30 miles.
How long have you been stuck here?
About 4 hours. I've got work at 3 in College Station, so looks like that's not happening.
In Tennessee, an onslaught of snow and ice gave way to bad driving conditions, even resulting in trouble for salt trucks. A state of emergency was declared as some 61,000 residents were left without power. On Tuesday morning, the biggest concern was ice.
We are concerned about refreezing. Temperatures will drop back down to the single digits. And we won't really get a relief until tomorrow afternoon.
Some took the winter weather worries in stride and felt right at home in the frigid conditions.
I'm Canadian, and frankly, the snowplows don't even come out for a day like this. This is just average winter weather. It's actually quite lovely, and the fact that it's easy to get around on foot, it's great.
Here in the nation's capital, yesterday's story was the snow with up to 8 inches in some areas. It led the federal government to close for the 4th time this season. Today, this return of the polar vortex has brought record-breaking low temperatures. It's been in the single digits here, and the last time that's happened in D.C. in the month of March was 1873. And the low temperatures continue to be the story for much of the nation. The Great Lakes have virtually become an ice rink. Images captured by NASA show yesterday's record lows have caused the lakes to ice back up, with researchers saying Lake Superior is now 95% covered in ice. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
President Obama has sent his budget up to Capitol Hill, but don't look for it to go anywhere. The president's budget is the latest example of the lack of real pressure to cut back on federal overspending. It closes some tax loopholes to pay for new spending, but Republicans argue the best way to help the economy grow is cutting taxes or reforming the tax code, not more government spending. Pat?
And I am appalled. I shouldn't be appalled, but ladies and gentlemen, we've lost control of this whole thing. We have a president who doesn't care about foreign policy. He doesn't care about the fact that we're going into this hideous hole of debt. They're not doing anything. And the waste is just unbelievable. It is, you'd be laughable if it wasn't so tragic. We're wasting money on things that are just totally unnecessary. It is crazy. And the amount of money that is, when we talk about debt in the trillions, how are we going to pay for it? This isn't building infrastructure. It isn't setting up a condition where our country will prosper. All it is just wasting money on things that have no bearing whatsoever to anything except getting some of these guys reelected. And we as a nation have become to be addicted to this heroin of federal spending. Something has got to be done. Something has to be done. And it looks like we have a president who really doesn't care. All he wants to do is have a good time. He takes vacations. He's got a very expensive airplane. He's got a very expensive house he lives in. He's got a very expensive fleet of automobiles. He has all the services that the very super rich would have, and he enjoys it. He doesn't care about the rest of us. John?
Pat, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is once again making clear he will safeguard Israel's security against a possible nuclear threat from Iran. Netanyahu met with President Obama at the White House, where they talked about the Palestinian peace talks and Iran's nuclear program. Netanyahu warned that Iran openly calls for Israel's destruction. Therefore, he says, Israel can't let the Iranian regime build nuclear weapons. He's concerned the U.S. negotiations are helping Tehran stall as it builds a nuclear bomb. Well, Israel's new ambassador in Washington is warning that Iran is not only a threat to Israel, but the United States as well. And as Eric Stakelbeck reports, he also wants to grow Israel's relationship with one of its strongest allies, Christians.
If you think what happens in the Middle East does not affect America, think again.
Iran is building ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. They're not building it for Israel. Their missiles can already reach Israel.
The target, says Israel's new ambassador to the U.S., is America.
How is this Iran nuclear threat not just an Israel problem? How is it a problem for America as well?
Well, because we're the little Satan. To Iran, you're the great Satan. And the only thing you put on an ICBM is a nuclear warhead. That's it. And they're designed to propel and to be sent thousands of miles across the ocean to try to reach you.
Ron Dermer is uniquely positioned to speak to Americans. Although an Israeli citizen, Dermer was born and raised in the United States. His father and brother both served as mayor of Miami Beach, and Dermer attended the University of Pennsylvania.
My whole belief system is based on being raised in this country. You know, when I think of courage, I think of Normandy, because I was born and raised as an American. And when I think of justice, I think of Martin Luther King Jr.
He moved to Israel in the 1990s and rose to become Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's closest advisor. Yet Dermer told CBN News he still speaks American, a trait that will come in handy as he tries to convince Americans about Iran's true danger.
Iran is the foremost sponsor of terrorism in the world. In the last 3 years alone, they have perpetrated terror attacks in 25 countries on 5 continents. You do not want to give the foremost sponsor of terrorism in the world, you don't want them anywhere close to nuclear weapons, because then you could find those weapons in a theater very close to you.
According to Dermer, the only way to stop Iran's nuclear weapons program comes through crippling sanctions and a credible military threat. As Israel's ambassador, he must make that case directly to the White House. President Obama opposes new sanctions and is committed to dialogue and diplomacy with the Iranian regime.
The only way that this regime in Iran will give up their nuclear weapons program is if they're faced between a choice of the survival of the regime and the weapons program. If that's the choice that Iran faces, then they'll give up the program. If they don't face that choice, they will not give up the program.
In facing Iran and other threats, Dermer says Israel has no greater ally than American Christians.
How important is that Christian support as we move into some pretty perilous times?
I believe that the Christian community of the United States, the tens of millions of Christians, of evangelical Christians throughout this country, can stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel, beat back any attempts to delegitimize, to libel, to malign Israel.
That's one reason Ambassador Dermer says he's looking to strengthen that partnership.
I think in the relationship between Christians and the State of Israel, we have only scratched the surface. There's a lot more to come.
Eric Stakelbeck, CBN News, Washington.
Pat, Ambassador Dermer seems uniquely positioned for his new role.
Extraordinary. He's, one of the previous ambassadors, a dear friend, and his wife's charming lady. And I said, boy, you don't have a trace of an accent. You speak like an American. She said, I ought to. I was born in Ohio. So I mean, we have that bond across the oceans with our Israeli friends, and I think it's marvelous that they know that the evangelical Christians are their strongest supporters. But ladies and gentlemen, again, we have a president who just doesn't get it. The threats are real, but he doesn't seem to care. You know, we're looking at nuclear holocaust. We're looking at a fanatical regime that is dedicated to destroying one nation and harming others. And we talk about diplomacy. Come off it. We need to act tough, but we don't do it. We've lost our preeminence as the world's greatest power. We're losing it. We've brought this thing upon ourselves. Don't make any mistake about it. I know you may be having a good time. Life's good for you. I hope it is. But some stuff is coming down the road that's not too pleasant.
The United Kingdom has announced regulations for a new fertilization method that could create babies using sperm and eggs from 3 people. Doctors say the technique could eliminate debilitating and potentially fatal diseases passed from mother to child. North Korea has released a 75-year-old Australian missionary after 3 weeks detention. John Short was arrested February 16th for secretly distributing Bible tracts at a Buddhist temple in Pyongyang. North Korea deported him this morning after he asked for forgiveness and apologized for committing anti-state religious acts. His wife Karen tells CBN News prayer made all the difference. And you can hear that interview and always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.